What is it about having a great mealtime together that's relaxing and enjoyable?
Really just a cool time to just like reframe life.
We go around the table and we talk about what was the best part of your day.
If we were home, we sat around the table and had a meal together.
It's super cheesy sometimes, and like, tell me one thing you love about your brother.
I had the same 3 meals, like just over and over and over.
We try to make it where we don't talk about work at all.
Who was the best behaved of the kids?
Oh, me.
Jesus, the night before he died, he sat down and had a meal with his disciples.
There is something about being able to just sit down and have a meal with somebody that is just disarming.
I've been in several groups, and I've seen both sides.
Your group actually becomes your family.
It's a commitment really from everybody that's just like, if we're going to be a part of this group, we're going to be in each other's lives.
Welcome everybody at One Life East and Henderson and West. And I want to start with an illustration, and then we're going to go into the passages that we're looking at. But these are pivotal. The illustration and the passage are going to do two things. First of all, they're going to review where we've been during the table series, and then also, more importantly, where we're going. So it's going to be very, very important to kind of lock in to what I'm about to say. Now, I will warn you about this illustration that I'm going to begin with. I think my theory is it's going to divide our church in about 3 categories, okay? For some of you, your respect for me and perhaps One Life is going to go up as a result of hearing this illustration. For others of you, it will have the opposite effect. Your respect levels will go down, okay? And then for others, you're not listening anyway. You'll be indifferent. You'll just kind of be still thinking about where you're going for lunch, okay? So that will happen. But I also can warn you, we just had one of our service leaders at our East Campus give an illustration about dropping her retainer into the toilet. So I don't know if this is quite on that level of just dividing our church, all right? But I had to acknowledge that. Okay, so it's not on that level. Last Saturday, here it is. Last Saturday, I went up to Indianapolis to Lucas Oil Stadium and saw Taylor Swift in concert. Thank you very much. But here's the real kicker. It's the 4th time I've seen her. You heard right. See what I mean? Make your judgments, pick your side, wherever you want to go. Now, there's a lot of backstory I won't bother you with, but basically I have 2 girls and they love her, and we've kind of made a little bit of a tradition in the last few years of going there, but it came in, she was doing a tour this year, and it came into Christmas. I was going to buy them tickets for Christmas, and I looked at the tickets, and I'm like, well, that's not what you're getting for Christmas, okay? So and I always get nosebleed cheap seats. I mean, just way out there, get us in the building, and we've always been fine with that, but even those were just way out of my price range. We accepted that. We're like, okay, we're not going to be able to pull this off. Well, a few months go by, and a friend of mine texts me out of nowhere, and he says, hey, I want to send your entire family to Taylor Swift up in Lucas Oil. So I said, okay. But I had mentioned it to him. It was just something he had in his own mind. We hadn't talked about that or anything like that. But that's not the real kicker. What really happened that was very important, and I want you to get into, is that when we got to Lucas Oil Stadium, we gave the usher our ticket, and because we didn't know where our seats were, and they kind of waved us on this way, and they kind of had us go kind of off the beaten path, and we got on an elevator that had an attendant in it. Which, I've had that happen like once in my life. There's a guy sitting in the elevator doing the numbers for me. So he takes us up to this area, and I want to show you a picture of a hallway. But it's very important to see this picture of this hallway. I want you to note about this hallway. First of all, it's nice. Second of all, it's empty, except for one guy. This was the most attended concert in the history of Lucas Oil Stadium. There are over 50,000 people in that building, and no one in the hallway, okay? We're not a part of the herd, except for that guy at the end who was checking to make sure you even belong in that hallway. You get to the end of the hallway, and I took a picture of this. This is where we were going. The quarterback suite. Now, I didn't know there was such a thing as a quarterback suite at Lucas Oil, but there is. Let me show you a picture of the quarterback suite. This is where we attended the Taylor Swift concert. Now, I've been to a lot of concerts. This is our living room area. You can see off to the left that was our living room area. And then the seats that were padded, okay? They were padded seats like theater seats, and they had space in front of them. If you've ever been to the nosebleeds, like most of us, you kind of sit like this. And then when, heaven forbid, someone or you has to go to the bathroom or something like that, you go like, excuse me, pardon me, excuse me, pardon me, excuse me, pardon me. Kind of make your way out. I mean, this is how we've lived at concerts. Yet we had our own living room and padded seats and space. And there was no one else up there except for maybe a handful. There was like a dozen kids up there, and that was it. It had its own concession stand. I wasn't hungry, I wasn't thirsty. I bought popcorn and Coke anyway, because I could without standing in line, and I sat in different seats, just eating my popcorn, drinking my Coke. Here's what I know about the workers. There were like 6 workers up there, and they had to know, you're not used to being up here, are you? Because we're like geeking out, whoa, God, look at that. We're taking pictures by the chairs. It's amazing, you know? So, I don't know where I was going with that, but okay. Keep your eye on that. Here's the point. We were in a place that we did not earn, that we did not deserve, and that was based on someone else's resources. I had no idea. He sent me tickets. They said quarterback suite on them. We didn't know what that meant. And here's the thing about it. You can't buy those just by buying tickets. You can't just go on there. It's a place that's reserved for people who have done other things with their finances that even give them access. That's why there wasn't anybody up there. I mean, no one else belongs up there. We were looking down on the throngs of common people. It was amazing. I always wanted to do that, see all of you down there, you know. I'm overlooking this up here in the thrones, man. This is how the other half lives. So we're up there, but I had it by someone else's resources. And what do you think my reaction was? I had no idea. You think the first thing I did? It wasn't buy a Coke or the popcorn. That came a little bit later. Got on my phone. I'm texting my friend like crazy, taking pictures, saying, thank you so much. It was already enough that you sent our family. It was 8 of us. But it is funny. We took one of the 8 tickets we gave to a couple of my niece's daughters, and they were like middle school and high school. And one of them had never been to a concert before. And we were like, this is not normal. You have to understand, this can't be your standard from now on. Do not do that to yourself. So I called him what I do. Thank you. Thomas Erskine is a theologian who said this. I want you to remember this throughout the rest of the morning. In the New Testament, religion is grace and ethics is gratitude. In the New Testament, religion is grace and ethics is gratitude. I want you to imagine, and that illustration will come in a little bit later. I want you to imagine in your mind going back 2,000 years and think of yourself as a Roman citizen back in those days. You live in the city of Rome. Maybe you're wearing a toga. You live in the city of Rome, and you go to a church. You have become a believer. Maybe you're a slave, and you become a believer, and you go to a church, and your church is just a large house that probably belonged to an aristocrat, and you sat down at a very, very, very long table. That's how they would do that. There was a meal there, and when you came in, everybody hugged each other, and you talked, and you related, and everything else, and you sang some songs. And then someone at the end of the table would do what I'm doing now, got up and teach. But today, what he does is he says, we have a letter from the Apostle Paul. And you've never met the Apostle Paul, you've never seen him, he didn't start this church or anything, but you have heard of him. He's kind of a heavy in the church, he's even controversial among some people. We have a letter from him that he sent us particularly. And then you listen, and it's a long letter, and there's a lot there. And 30, 40, 50 minutes go by to read this letter, but you're mesmerized by it because it's saying all kinds of amazing things. It's saying things like, now a righteousness from God has been given. A righteousness that's by faith and not by works of the law. It says things like, God demonstrates his own love for us in this, that while we were still sinners, Christ died for us. It says, now that we have been justified by faith, we have peace with God by faith. And that there is no condemnation for those who are in Christ. And all these things are just rolling out, and you're just listening deeply. And then there's this part where it praises God and says, oh, how amazing and majestic and mysterious he is. And then there's a pause in the letter and a turn. And it says this, a passage familiar to many of you, but maybe not to all of you. It says, therefore, after all that reading, I urge you, brothers, by the mercies of God, to present your bodies a living, holy sacrifice, acceptable to God, which is your spiritual service of worship. I urge you, brother, by the mercies of God. In other words, we've just spent, in our Bibles, it's 11 chapters of God's mercies. Here's what he's done in Christ. Here's who Christ is, what he's done, his death on the cross, his resurrection from the dead, and what it's done for you. And it has given you access to something you did not have access to on your own, and you couldn't. Not even available to you. You have been given to, if you place your faith in him, you've been given something that's out of someone else's resources as a result of someone else's generosity. That's why you have it. And so therefore, in light of that, looking at it, understanding it, letting it move you and fuel you and be your foundation, offer your body. Here's what you do. You just kind of offer your body, say, God, here's what I'm gonna do. And then for the rest of the time, and he goes on, and probably another 20 minutes worth of reading, he gives these injunctions. In the New Testament, religion is grace and ethics is gratitude. And I want to read you one of the injunctions, the little paragraph that he gives. This is kind of ethical challenges. Listen to what it says. Let love be without hypocrisy. Abhor what is evil, cling to what is good. Be devoted to one another in brotherly love. Give preference to one another in honor. Not lagging behind in diligence, fervent in spirit, serving the Lord, rejoicing in hope, persevering in tribulation, devoted to prayer, contributing to the needs of the saints, practicing hospitality. That's a number of different things. Those who are smarter than me about language, and I read a lot of commentaries on this particular passage, and they all pretty much said the same thing. It said in the original Greek language, when people were listening to it back then, it would have had a little bit more of a rhythmic feel to it. And one commentator took his stab at it. He said it kind of sounds like this. In brotherly love, being devoted to one another. In honor, outdoing one another. In zeal, never flagging. In the spirit, being aglow. In the Lord, serving. In hope, rejoicing. In tribulation, being patient. In prayer, being constant. To the needs of the saints, sharing generously. In hospitality, being diligent. There's a lot there, and what I want to do today is spend the rest of our time zooming in on one of those, and then next week we're going to do another one. But I want to make sure you before you walk out of this room, that you remember a couple things. First of all, by the mercies of God, you have been granted access to something that you did not get on your own, and you can't. You didn't have access. And it was granted you as a result of someone else's generosity and someone else's resources. That's how it works. And out of that, fueled by that, founded on that, you offer your body. And then how do you live? Out of gratitude, we're gonna look at one. Be devoted to one another in brotherly love. Be devoted to one another in brotherly love. Remember all those other ones, but really keep your eyes on that one. I'm grateful. My heart is softened. How am I supposed to live? What am I supposed to do? I offer my body, Lord. And he says, hey, I want you to be devoted to one another in brotherly love. Let's think about that for a second. I want us first of all to acknowledge openly that he says there's a one another. In that passage, there's an assumed one another. Now, if you were back and you were sitting at that table in Rome, what would you think? One another? Well, that's everybody sitting around the table right now, right? It's that person across from me, that aristocrat, or that person who's a merchant. We don't usually get together. Before Christianity ever came along, we weren't even allowed at a table with one another. I never would have walked in a house like this and sat down at the table. I might have sat down, I might have served as a slave, but I've never been in a meal before. This is amazing. So he says, keep that up. Serve one another. Amazing. But there is a one another. What this table series is really all about, I kind of subtitle it in my own head, Rediscovering the Beauty and the Wonder of the Local Church. Rediscovering the beauty and the glory of the local church, or something along those lines. Rediscovering the English language. And I think that's important to do because I think many of us, we openly acknowledge during this, struggle with that. Now, not everybody here because you're at least here. But if we were to go around and survey, I bet you would find people who have been in churches a lot, who have been hurt in them, who have been let down by leaders in them, and who have watched open hypocrisy on display, right? The two of the three most painful eras of my own personal life was directly as a result of splits within a church context. Incredibly painful, really, really painful. I've seen the leadership falls and all the rest. But here's something to think about. Still, What we're trying to rediscover is why the one another. It was God's idea. The local church is the one another, and it's something that God values. And he says, as if you're really understanding of his mercies, if you really get a hold of the fact that you have access to something that you had to come through someone else's resources, and you're grateful, you'll think about the one another, and you'll be devoted to them in brotherly love. You know, I talked to a retailer one time and said, when retail stores come into this area, the tri-state area, they do research and how we're going to market to these people. And they said the number one characteristic of the tri-state is family. People devoted to their families. They love family. They're about family. I mean, we're going to get stuff for our family. And so they cater to that and they market to that just in this area, especially those of you at the West Side. Shout out to the West Side. West Side, especially known for deep family roots and all the rest. Now, here's the thing that's interesting about that. When I mention family, for some of you, it's like, yes, that's exactly what I'm about. I love family. It's awesome. For others of you, if you're being honest, you're like, I hated family. I was talking to a person out in our lobby just today who was telling me how her husband grew up in a majorly dysfunctional home and was abused inside his home by a church person. Makes it worse. So we know that. We know there is such a thing as family dysfunction. Just like we know there is such a thing as church dysfunction, right? But do we all just say, well, therefore family is a stupid idea. Whoever came up with that, let's just get rid of it. Of course not. Most of you, the reason you're passionate, some people who are passionate about family are the ones that grew up in a dysfunctional home. They're like, that's not gonna be my family. I'm gonna do it right. I'm gonna do it well. I'm gonna be there for my kids and all the rest. That's the point. There is a one another. And we need to be passionate about that ideal. The church can be a massively hurtful place. It can, let's just admit it, just like family. And it's interesting that the number one metaphor in the Bible of the local church is family. That's why we call it the table. And so we can't dismiss the table altogether just because we know there's hurt and dysfunction out in the other places. I want to react to what some people think. I heard it a lot. It's gaining popularity. That people say things like, well, you don't have to be a part of a church to be a Christian anyway. You don't have to be a part of a church to be a Christian. And my thing is, well, that's true. It is. The way you become a Christian is by faith. You receive the ticket by someone else's resources. You believe on what Christ has done on the cross. You believe in his resurrection and the whole bit, right? But here, please listen to me on this. You don't have to be a part of a church to be a Christian. But you do have to be a part of a church to live like one. You don't have to be a part of a church to be a Christian, to become one. But you do have to be a part of a church to live like one, and my proof is right there in that passage. And I picked those words very specifically. That's why I'm looking at them. Because I said, be a part of a church. I didn't say attend one. Because many of us will say, we think of church as an event we attend, and we have to be solid on this. Church is not an event you attend. It's a community you belong to. And it's because of the one another factor. They looked across the table at one another back in the Roman Empire, and they said, this is my family. Be devoted to one another because of the mercies of God. Let's think about that, devotion. Be devoted. Those who are smarter than me as well, they're in the language thing. Brotherly love, we'll look at here in just a moment. But the word translated brotherly love is Philadelphia. That's where they get the name of the city and they get the little motto, the city of brotherly love and that whole deal. But they said that word devoted actually points to parent love. And why? Because functional parents are pictures of devotion, right? I love watching my daughter and son-in-law raise our grandson. And here's what I've learned. You ever wonder why parents are kind of all giddy and easygoing about everything? And here, have some ice cream, sure, and all that sort of stuff. And they're just laughing all the time. Because of this. I would say that parenting is playing football, okay? It's playing football. Grandparenting is watching football from the quarterback suite. With my popcorn and my Coke. Like, woo, good play. Ooh, man, that one had to hurt. What'd you think of that? You know, there's a lot of thrills in playing football, but there's a whole lot more thrills watching it. You have to put up the hurts and the problems and issues and stuff. Parenting is a picture of devotion. Think about devotion. He says, be devoted to one another in brotherly love. You know what devotion is? And I'm going to say it in a cheesy way, but I can't help it because that's my personality. Devotion is not based on emotion. Devotion is based on decision. Devotion is not based on emotion. Devotion is based on decision. You see, what he's calling for is don't base your relationships on your emotional highs or lows. Because if you do that, and we do this whenever we get married, you know what that is? It's a big devotion ceremony is all it is. It's saying I'm transferring my emotional stuff that I have for this person over to decision. Where I'm going to say, no matter what happens, I don't know if I'm going to be healthy or sick. I don't know if I'm going to be rich or poor. I don't know where we're going and what life's going to do to us, but one thing's going to be constant. I've decided I'm going to be with you. Now, ancient people, in Bible times, they used to do that in their marriages, obviously, but they did that with friends sometimes. They would pick a friendship. They would say, I'm going to make what they call a covenant with you. And a covenant was a devotion decision. I always like to say that covenant is the opposite of casual. Well, I have casual relationships, but sometimes you enter a covenant, and that just means no matter what life brings, no matter how things go, I've decided that my love for you is going to stay constant. And isn't it interesting that it assumes that you can do that as a human being? You can do it. And he calls on us as a result of our gratitude, and then looking all the way down to our offering our bodies, be devoted to one another. And then finally, brotherly love. Brotherly love. I have brothers. Maybe some of you do, and you can automatically relate. You're going, man, are you sure that's translated right? Brotherly love. What's that? I mean, you know what my brotherly love growing up was? It was that. I mean, we did a lot of that. We wrestled each other on the floor. We shouted at each other. We carried on and everything. And I think that's a part of it. Now, I don't know if it's making distinction between brotherly and sisterly. I don't know that. I don't think so. I think brotherly love, as I was kind of thinking about my own relationship with my brothers and back in the culture and all that, it was kind of a picture of camaraderie, devoted camaraderie. Like we're in this together. Soldiers experience that, the band of brothers effect. Kind of, we're in this together. And we are devoted to one another, and we're walking through life together. You see, my brothers, we have an interesting relationship. I mean, but there's a lot, when I think about brotherly love, there's honestly a pressure taken off. Because my brothers and I aren't emotional towards one another necessarily. We've had a couple hugs through the years and all that sort of stuff at those meaningful Christmas times kind of deal, I think. I don't know. I'm just taking it for granted. Maybe we have. But it takes the pressure off. Because you know what my brotherly love is? It's an always there love. I put it this way. Brotherly love is based on family identity, not personal affinity. Brotherly love is founded on family identity, not personal affinity. And what that means is, my relationship with you is not based on the fact that we like to go play tennis together, although that's nice. Or we have a lot in common, or our emotions are kind of tracking together and all that. We have those kinds of things. We all have families. We know there's members of our family that we just kind of naturally get along with. We also know that there's members of our family that are just members of our family. They're there. God placed them there. We're not even sure why. It's kind of like, okay, I'm in. You know how that goes? They're always in the house, come on the holidays. They're there. There's Uncle so-and-so. He's there. I don't even know what our relationship other than family. But you ever notice that it's loyal? And it's constant. Because it's based on family identity, not personal affinity. Be devoted to one another. Decide. Our relationships are going to be this way. Not because our emotions are always tracking with one another. I have one brother that's an older brother who's an engineer. I have a younger brother who's a musician. You try to put that together. I mean, think about that. But we get together, and the thing about it is, we're always there. We've always been brothers. We're going to stay brothers until the day of our death. And we ebb and flow in our relationship. I talked to one of them last night. I haven't talked to the other one in a while. And I feel guilty about that. And then we kind of patch that up. And then we go back and forth. But the devotion stays. You've been given admission to something that you personally did not have access to. Being justified by faith, you now have peace with God, and it was granted to you as a gift, pure raw. You could not have gotten in there without anything. As a result of that, be grateful. Think about gratitude. Offer your body, and then listen to what God says. He says, look around at the one another's. Look around at them. And just be devoted. Just decide. It doesn't require emotion of you. It just requires loyalty. We have each other's backs. When you really need us there, we're there. And we think about one another, and we're concerned about one another's lives. That's brotherly love. Now here's what I'd like you to do. We're gonna go to the campus here in just a moment. But I was thinking about this just this past week. I got a beautiful example of this because it was a simple example. I was listening to our worship leaders and some people on our worship teams from different campuses, and we were telling stories out of just relationships. We want you to be in groups and teams. We said that we want every single group and team to help people trust and follow Jesus. In other words, be in one another's lives. Don't just kind of show up and do tasks. We have growth groups inside living rooms that we're challenging everybody to get in. Why? Because of this one another thing. And I just heard a simple little story. On one of the worship teams, there was a girl who was running this what we call the CG, which is the ones that has the words up for you. You appreciate them a lot, right? And then there was another person who was a director. We have volunteer directors and CG people that work back in our booths. And the CG person just happened to be going through a really, really, really rough time in her life. And the director knew about it, has prayed for her, talked to her, and they just relate on that level. And their lives apart from this building are very, very different from one another. But they're there for one another, and they listen to one another. It's not complicated, it's not difficult, but what it takes is just decision to be grateful to what God has done. Now here's what I want to do. Here in just a moment, we're going to let the room fall silent. And I want you to think about your relationships, and primarily start with inside church, but you can kind of expand it outside. But I want you to think about a relationship that maybe you have devalued, that your devotion, while it's still there, is kind of faded. And I want to invite everybody to kind of write down what that relationship is and what's an action you can take today before the day's over, or this week before the week's over, whatever suits your life, to repair that. And so I'm going to turn it over now to our leaders at our other campuses and release you guys to do that.